Good morning, everyone. As before, the presentation portion of our program today will be recorded for potential future use in the museum's virtual programs. If you do not wish to appear in the recording, we just ask that you please turn off your camera, and a reminder to mute yourself unless you have a question to ask or a comment to make, and we'll open that up at the end for our discussion portion. My name is Karla Rasmussen, and I am the programs manager for the WDM organization. I'm working out of the Moose Jaw location, but officially I work for our corporate office in Saskatoon. And an official welcome to everyone joining us from around the province. My co-worker Dave is joining us remotely today from Saskatoon. And as usual, he's helping to do a great job behind the scenes running the technical side of the presentation. He'll also be helping to look after the chat. And so if you should have any questions or you'd like to share a memory or a comment, you can note it in the chat function at the bottom of your screen, and we'll circle back around to those at the conclusion of the presentation. I'd also like to introduce Alexis Jones, who has just started as of last Tuesday as Moose Jaw's new programs and volunteer coordinator. She's expressed her interest in leading the coffee club program moving forward as we resume this fall after the summer break. So a big welcome to Alexis as well. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the WDM Moose Jaw is located on Treaty 4 territory and the homeland of the Métis. This is the traditional territory of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota First Nations and the Métis people. The WDM is committed to working towards a new relationship anchored in the spirit of the treaties and to educating Saskatchewan people about their shared history of treaty making. The WDM has 4 locations, each with different artifacts and exhibits on display, as well as our corporate office in Saskatoon, which also serves as the collections warehouse for the artifacts that are not on display. Our Yorkton Museum tells the story of people through immigration and settlement in the last 100 years. The WDM North Battleford has an outdoor settler village and a working farm. The museum in Saskatoon is our largest and houses a 1910 boomtown right inside their building. Saskatoon also features exhibits on Indigenous history, including Métis cultural traditions and the signing of the treaties with the Crown. And Moose Jaw's theme, where I'm located, is the transportation history of our province. At the WDM, we love to hear and share stories about Saskatchewan. Our vision is a Saskatchewan where everyone belongs and histories matter. And at the end of our presentation today, we'd love to hear more about your experiences and stories. So today we'll start things off speaking about some of the watercraft artifacts that we primarily have here at the WDM Moose Jaw. I'll start with our part of the province where I am living right now. While the rivers were the highways of the north, in the south, they were often thought of as roadblocks to overland travelers, and crossing them posed all sorts of difficulties. The most suitable crossing sites were places where rivers were narrow with gently sloping banks. But crossings were dangerous business on makeshift rafts. Sometimes wagons had to be floated across, horses and cattle made to swim. Strong currents, deep water, and treacherous ice conditions in the spring were just some of the dangers. The first Saskatchewan ferries, like the boat kept on the banks of the North Saskatchewan River near Fort Carlton and another at Batoche for crossing the South Saskatchewan, were owned by the Hudson's Bay Company. Both were left there for use by occasional travelers on the Carlton Trail that stretched from Red River, now Winnipeg, Manitoba area, to Fort Edmonton, which became the modern-day city of Edmonton. Even earlier, some Indigenous people sometimes built what were called bull boats, which were makeshift crafts made from buffalo hides stretched over willow sapling frames. In 1871, Xavier Letendre offered Saskatchewan's first semi-regular ferry service, a barge across the South Saskatchewan River at Batoche. A year or two later, Gabriel Dumont also set up a ferry a few kilometers upstream. By 1875, the territorial government decided that ferry operators needed permits to operate. The permit was given to the highest bidder, who then charged a fee to his passengers. When Saskatchewan became a province in 1905, the government took over all ferry service. In 1912, ferry operators were put on salaries, ending the toll system for daytime crossings. Xavier Letendre's ferry was outfitted with 2 oars to help propel it across the river. No easy job in the strong river current. A series of movable or current boards under the deck were positioned to catch the current. The wheel at the side of the ferry controlled these boards. In about 1873, Letendre set up a cable system anchored to a tower on either side of the river to prevent the ferry from being swept downstream. By 1926, it was time for a new ferry at the Batoche crossing. The government built 7 new scows that year, including one for Batoche. It served another generation of travelers until it was replaced by a larger motorized ferry in the late 1950s. Ferry service finally ended at Batoche in 1968 when Gabriel's Bridge opened a few kilometers to the south. This ferry, shown in our picture here, its weathered deck, worn by thousands of horse-drawn wagons, cars, and trucks, was rebuilt in 1972 from the old 1926 scow, and it was used in the movie called Alien Thunder, The Story of Almighty Voice, featuring actor Donald Sutherland. In 1926, the number of ferries in Saskatchewan peaked at 47. Maintaining the ferries, the cable systems, and the approaches to the ferries and the houses provided for the operators was a big job. Ferry construction crews were hired to do the work. With the construction of bridges in the 1930s, 40s, and later, the number of ferries declined, although traffic counts remained high. In 1955, 28 ferries transported nearly 900,000 passengers and vehicles of all kinds. By 1969, the last year in which ferry traffic records included the number of passengers, nearly 2 million passengers and vehicles of all descriptions crossed Saskatchewan rivers on 20 ferries. Over the years, wooden scows were replaced by steel ferries, and the old current board method of propelling them was replaced by gas or diesel motors. By 1979, the Fenton ferry was the only wooden ferry left. In 2005, 12 ferries provided service to Saskatchewan motorists. There was also a barge on Wollaston Lake. Now here's an interesting breakdown of ferry traffic on all Saskatchewan ferries in the 1926 year from the annual report of the Department of Highways. Vehicles pulled by 2 or more horses, there were 78,497. One-horse vehicles, there was just shy of 25,000. Saddle horses, there were 13,232 saddle horses that year. There were 36,658 loose animals, so that could be all kinds of smaller things. Individual passengers was just shy of 500,000. Automobiles in 1926-27, so this is kind of interesting. Think about that time period. There was 169,198 that used the ferries. That's kind of neat. Tractors and steam engines, 230 that year. So the total units was 812,144. So lots of things were moved on those waterways, that's for sure. All right, the Northcote. In the 1870s, steamboats were the only form of mass transportation in Saskatchewan. However, that didn't make them practical. If you've ever canoed on a Saskatchewan river, you would know that the water is often very, very low with large sandbars. To get around these sandbars, which could delay boats for 3 weeks or more, the captain had three choices. He could speed up the boat and try to get through it. He could turn the boat around and dig his way out with the paddle wheel, imagine that. Or he could grasshopper over it using 2 large poles and thrust their way over. Now, the real Northcote was used in the Battle of Batoche by the federal government forces in the 1885 Northwest Resistance. It was used as a gunboat and as a passenger boat to transport infantry troops and supplies to Batoche. The Northcote's whistle was intended to be a signal for the military offensive against the Métis stronghold. As the sternwheeler came alongside the Batoche ferry, Louis Riel and his men thought it would be a good idea to lower the ferry cable that ran over the river. It worked out to be a brilliant plan, as the lowered cable took out the Northcote's smokestacks, thus disabling the boat, as well as its whistle. The delay caused by the damage aided the Métis in holding their position for 3 days with no losses. The Battle of Batoche was the only naval battle ever to be conducted on the Canadian prairies. Now we've got a picture coming up here of a model of the Northcote, and we've also got a few of its original deck planks, and this is on display at the WDM Moose Jaw. Now moving to another steamer, we have a representation of the stern wheeler, the SS City of Medicine Hat, and it symbolizes a story of steamboats in Saskatchewan. The choice for this exhibit at the WDM Moose Jaw was inspired by the story of a shipwreck on the South Saskatchewan River. On June 1st, 1908, the SS City of Medicine Hat set out from Medicine Hat, Alberta, with flour from the Medicine Hat Milling Company, destined for the Winnipeg market. By June 7th, 1908, it had reached Saskatoon on the South Saskatchewan River. Although the young settlement had only one traffic bridge and 2 railway bridges, flooding complicated navigation under the bridges that spring. After safely passing under 2 railway bridges, the stern wheeler and rudder of the Medicine Hat got tangled in submerged telegraph wires. While the captain lost control of the boat, it slammed sideways into the traffic bridge, rolled and capsized, with tons of flour going overboard. In this photo, we can see a ladder being lowered down from the traffic bridge to rescue the crew of the rapidly sinking luxury steamer in what newspapers proclaimed as the worst nautical disaster in prairie history. Fortunately, no lives were lost. The passengers had disembarked before the accident, and the crew was able to safely escape by climbing up the bridge before the ship sank. In 2012, archaeologists uncovered over 1,000 artifacts from the riverbed that they are confident belong to the wreckage of the SS City of Medicine Hat. Saskatoon's brief flirtation with steamships ended with the demise of the Medicine Hat steamer. Over time, the river's current and souvenir hunters contributed to the City of Medicine Hat's disintegration. By the time the steamer met its end, city planners had already recognized the limitations of river travel on the South Saskatchewan and had thrown their lot in fully with the railway. By 1908, Saskatoon was connected by 3 major railway lines and was a transportation hub second only to Winnipeg. A number of leading Saskatoon businessmen worked and campaigned to ensure that the railways passed through Saskatoon. And it was due to these efforts that the small community on the banks of the South Saskatchewan River flourished into a major distribution point. After the trains became more common, the need for steamboats dropped. So a lot of the steamboats were converted to cruise steamers for entertaining passengers. I love this. You can still visit this. It's under the traffic bridge in Saskatoon. And you can see this representation of that SS City of Medicine Hat there on the panels. But moving to another ship, this enormous steering wheel with 13 spokes once graced the steamboat, the Alice Mates. The Alice Mates plied the rivers in Manitoba and Saskatchewan in the early 1920s. She was built in the Pas, Manitoba, and registered at Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. Its first owner was the Ladder Lake Lumber Company out of Big River, Saskatchewan, who used the Alice Mates to haul log booms on Cowan Lake. Later, she was used by the Pas Lumber Company of Manitoba to transport lumber and freight. This boat was a steam-driven sternwheeler with a wood-burning engine. Its length was 88.4 feet, the breadth was 19 feet, and the depth was 3.5 feet, and it was paddle-driven with 4 horsepower. All right, another ship here, or a boat, I should say, maybe not a ship, the Gull. The Gull was manufactured by the Russell Brothers Limited of Fort Frances, Ontario, a boat builder for the logging industry. Literature of the day described the boat as all steel from cabin to keel and powered with the Russell heavy-duty marine engine. Measuring 8.5 meters or 28 feet long, it was a workhorse. When the Hudson Bay Mining and Smelting Company decided to expand the Island Falls Station in 1935, it purchased the Gull for $2,965 to haul sand and gravel barges during the construction of turbines and generators. From 1935 until 1961, the Gull was one of 6 boats making the 115 kilometer journey between Flin Flon and Sandy Bay, Island Falls area. From mid-May to mid-October each year, it hauled passengers and cargo between the two locations, a round trip of 24 hours. For passengers, a ride on the Gull was free. Often the Gull was filled with children heading to camps along the reservoir, work crews, baseball teams, and even bagpipe bands traveling to the once thriving community of Island Falls. The Gull was removed from the water in 1961, and it was left in the bush. In 1985, SaskPower, Saskatchewan's provincial electrical utility, officially took over the Island Falls station. The Gull was hauled out of the bush, refurbished, and delivered to the Western Development Museum a year later. So it's joined us here in Moose Jaw. Now we're going to talk about some smaller personal boats. Some Indigenous people made canoes like this replica from birch bark. Their speed and maneuverability made them ideal for crisscrossing swift-moving rivers. This canoe and its paddles were built by Pete Dubé of Kitigan-Zibi Anishinaabe First Nation, Maniwaki, Quebec in 1933. Dubé traded the canoe for goods at Poirier's General Store, and when it was still new, and a Mr. Riley bought it from Poirier on November 8, 1933 for $18. Now, looking at the paddles there, the two larger paddles with the canoe cost $1 each. The smaller paddle on display was actually picked up during a portage on the Gatineau River in 1937. All right, we're going to move to another type of boat. The Hudson's Bay Company, which controlled the fur trade for many years, used larger York boats because they could handle twice as much cargo as the average canoe. It lacked the grace of the smaller canoe, but it proved to be much more efficient freight carrying. Sturdily built with a flat bottom, they carried 4.5 tons, which is about 4 metric tons, of cargo on shallow prairie rivers. So some advantages to their construction. The construction of the railroads quickly ended the usefulness of the York boat. This next one is a favorite of the Moose Jaw staff here. We love this boat. With an idea from Florida and a boat builder from England, a Regina businessman solved his daily summer commute to work. From his cottage on Katepwa Lake in the Qu'Appelle Valley, Robert Ferguson wanted to go to Katepwa Beach so he could catch the daily train to Regina. The year was 1912 and his options were limited. While visiting Florida, Ferguson had obtained plans for a long, narrow, fast boat. He concluded it would be perfect to ply the waters of Katepwa Lake. With no one in Regina willing to undertake the job, Ferguson brought in F. Hedder, a boat builder from the Kingston-on-Thames area of England. Working with fine mahogany lumber in the shop of a Regina business called the Craftsman, Hedder completed the 8-meter-long or 26-foot boat after a summer's work. In tribute to its Florida design, Ferguson named the boat the Okehumkee. The name Okehumkee, besides being fun to say, derives from a Seminole word for water, uki. A 19th century Florida steamboat was also named the Okehumkee. The original engine was a 4-cylinder, 2-cycle marine type. This motor and the streamlined design proved plenty of get up and go for the daily lake trip. The boat also served as a pleasure craft, and most of the kids living along the lake enjoyed a summertime ride or two. At his cottage, Ferguson built a float-in boathouse where he kept the Okehumkee. After Ferguson passed away in 1924, the Okehumkee survived a few more years as a tour boat, taking passengers all around the lake. In 1954, 42 years after it was built, it was finally pulled from the lake. Love that picture, that one's awesome. For nearly 100 years, ending in 1976, mail order catalogs like T. Eaton's came with their shiny pages full of the newest products. If you're not familiar, a catalog is a special book that you can look at with photos and illustrations of things that you might want to purchase. Think early Amazon. You would fill in a form and mail it to the company saying how many, what size, and what color of item you would like to purchase, and then they would mail it to you. Depending on where you live, this could take days, weeks, or even months. There was no Amazon Prime with 2-day shipping back then. Now, you could order almost anything from the T. Eaton's catalog: furniture, farm equipment, clothing, sleighs, tools, and more. And why, you could even order a whole house. While it often took a while for your order to arrive, this mail order convenience helped to bring necessary supplies and other items to remote locations that did not have department stores nearby. So in 1955, Len Small ordered this cedar strip boat made for Eaton's by a company in Peterborough, Ontario. So we've got a mail order boat here. It was powered by a 20 horsepower outboard motor. By 1959, Small wanted a bigger motor, so he bought a 35 horsepower Evinrude. For 20 years, the Small family used their boat on Buffalo Pound Lake for pleasure boating, water skiing, and fishing. In the 1950s, George Markowitz and Doug Stephen put their heads together and decided they wanted a boat of their own. They bought the hull manufactured in Saskatoon by Lane and Lane Millwork from a supplier in Moose Jaw. Markowitz and Stephen built the top and seats themselves and bought a 25 horsepower Elto outboard motor. The boat was docked at the family cabin at Buffalo Pound Lake, just north of Moose Jaw here. Endless hours of summer fun were spent cruising the waters on the Prairie Lake. Now, if you've got a Moose Jaw connection, you might find this one interesting, specifically. Harnessing the energy and enthusiasm of woodworking students at A.E. Peacock Collegiate in Moose Jaw, shop teacher David Boura set his woodworking class to work in 1986. The 1920s style was selected to honor the early days of boating along the Moose Jaw River and the Thunder Creek. This rowboat was built using plans for the Victoria pattern from the book Small Boats by Philip C. Bolger. Bolger described the design for this versatile craft as light enough for one person alone to haul onto a trailer easily or drag up a beach, buoyant enough to carry a family, and stable enough to stand up in or clamber out of over the stemhead. Able enough to cope with a fair chop, but not so high-ended as to be blown out of control in strong winds. All this and the rowboat is elegant to the eye as well. The Peacock students succeed with their project, paying special attention to the period details like copper rivets and brass oarlocks. The confluence of the Moose Jaw River and the Thunder Creek had been a meeting place for many Indigenous people over the years. From the beginning of the settlement of Moose Jaw, the cool waters and green banks attracted boaters, canoeists, and families of picnickers. A rowboat like this may have well plied the waters of the Moose Jaw River or Thunder Creek in the warm summer days of the 20s. Great picture there too of the class. All right. After the Second World War, Saskatchewan's north began to draw new visitors as going to the lake became a summer ritual. Tourists and fishers were drawn to the northern wilderness. An all-weather road from Waskesiu to L'Orange made possible a new business, the tourist camp. With all the fishing boats going out each morning from northern settlements at the end of the road, many tourists wanted to get off by themselves and fish in virgin territory. Some enterprising flyers used their planes to locate good remote campsites and fly in the materials to build cabins. Guiding and outfitting, hunting and fishing trips, getting away from it all at northern lodges. Bush planes like the Piper Cub shown here with its pontoons made this all possible. Now, a gentleman named Ernie Backlund was a northerner who saw an opportunity. He built cabins and set up an outfitting business. By the mid-1950s, every boat he owned was out on the lakes. Although boats were available from the Eaton's catalog and other retailers, freight was costly, so Backlund began to build his own boats. He tweaked a standard design using his experience on the lake to guide him. By the late 1950s, Backlund was building from 20 to 40 boats each winter. This boat, which is now at the Moose Jaw location, was his last, built in 1977 for his grandsons. Now this one, I wasn't quite sure where it fit into everything. It's kind of unique and we don't know a ton about it, but we have the Chinook hovercraft here. It was built by Hovertech Incorporated in Concord, Ontario. It is steered by a rudder and rides on a cushion of air over water, ice, land, snow, or slush. It could travel up to 70 kilometers an hour or 45 miles an hour and could carry loads of up to 113 kilograms or 250 pounds. So kind of a unique vessel here. I'm not sure we want to maybe call it a boat, but it is a watercraft of sorts. So there it is included for us today. So we're going to do a little switch here. We're going to go from boats to planes, and I think you'll see why here in a moment. When the Royal Canadian Air Force, or the RCAF, needed an airplane for aerial mapping and forest fire patrols in Canada's north, it turned to Canadian Vickers, a boat building company in Montreal. Canadian Vickers built its first Vedette in 1924. That's what we see here. Another 60 followed in 5 different versions. The Vickers Vedette looked like a boat with wings. The biplane had a wooden hull and an open cockpit. Designed for short takeoffs and landings on water, the flying boat was especially suited for work in the northern wilderness. The passenger sat in front of the pilot. The engine was mounted pusher style behind the pilot with the propeller facing the back. The RCAF was responsible for forest protection and aerial surveys for mapping northern Saskatchewan. Working with the province, a base was set up at Ladder Lake near Big River in 1927. The RCAF provided 4 Vickers vedettes and a Vickers Varuna. 3 of the planes were assigned to forest fire patrols. 2 vedettes were to do aerial photography. More planes were acquired later. Every day, the fire patrols headed out from Ladder Lake, one to the east as far as East Trout Lake, one northwest to Isle La Crosse, and one north to Lac La Ronge, then west to Pine House. For the forest fire spotter, the ride was like sitting in an airborne kayak. The pilot sat behind him, closer to the roaring engine. When they spotted a fire, the crew radioed its location to the base. Battered by wind and weather while strapped into the open front passenger compartment, the photographers stood up to man the camera. As the pilot flew back and forth at 10-kilometer intervals across a 100 square kilometer grid, the photographer snapped 3 photos a minute of the land below, one to the right, one to the left, and one straight ahead, and kept the camera loaded with film. There was no time for sightseeing. Back on the ground, the photographer developed the film. If the photographs didn't turn out, the crew had to go back and redo the work. Cartographers then used the photographs to produce topographical maps. When Saskatchewan gained control of its natural resources from the federal government in 1930, the province took over fire patrols. 3 years later, the Saskatchewan government made a deal with Ottawa, buying 5 used Vickers Vedette flying boats for $1. The planes were registered as CFSAA, CFSAB, CFSAC, CFSAD, and CFSAE. 3 were flown in and 2 needed complete overhauls. As a part of the deal, the province got to use the Ladder Lake base in exchange for land for a military camp near Dundurn. From 1934 to 36, the vedettes were put through their paces, transporting firefighting crews and government personnel, flying mapping missions for the Geographical Survey of Canada, evacuating medical emergency cases, and helping to establish a fish stocking program. And this is a quotation I'm going to read here from the annual report of the Department of Natural Resources, 1934-35. In view of the pilot's experience during 1934, it is their opinion that aircraft of the flying boat type proved highly satisfactory for the nature of the duties performed. However, tragedy struck in 1936 when the Vickers Vedette CFSAE crashed at the north end of Delaron Lake. The pilot parachuted to safety, but the passenger was killed. A court of inquiry ordered all vedettes grounded until safety belts could be installed. But none of the other 4 ever flew again. They were obsolete and maintenance was too expensive. New planes were needed, but a cash-strapped province in the depths of the Great Depression did not have the money. By this time, however, some forest fire patrols had been contracted out to commercial operators who had larger and faster planes, and an arrangement like this would continue for years. The construction of a Vickers Vedette flying boat is the last of a series of aircraft reconstructions by the Vintage Aircraft Restorers Group, or the VAR, a volunteer group at the WDM Moose Jaw. In 1923, the WDM acquired the remains of the wooden hull of a Vickers Vedette flying boat. The WDM created a small exhibit, which is what we're seeing here, to tell the Vedette story in northern Saskatchewan. The exhibit has now been expanded to include a full-size replica. Over the course of 9 years, 23,328 volunteer hours have gone into this remarkable plane. In 2014, the project won a 99's Canadians Awards for Aviation for promoting and preserving aviation and aeronautics in Canada. So there we go. There's some of the original team there. So that pretty much wraps up the end of our presentation here. I'm just going to go a little bit further and let you know that our WDM Virtual Coffee Club will take a little bit of a break. We'll resume in September after a summer hiatus, and we will be sending out an email later in the summer as soon as we have our new dates and topics confirmed for the fall sessions. So please watch your inbox or check out our website at wdm.ca under the Virtual Coffee Club link. I hope that you'll join us then. And if, again, as usual, if you enjoyed today's presentation, we encourage you to tell your friends. Thank you once again, everyone, and we look forward to seeing you again in the fall.